I'm Jack Jordan, former superintendent of Northside School District, and working with the Northside Museum Association, it is my great pleasure to interview two people that I've known since 1959. They are tremendous legacies for the Northside District, excellent students, excellent sportsmen, loved Northside, and they're going to tell us about their families and the way they came to the United States, where they came in Europe, and about their experiences in the schools of Northside. I'd like to introduce to you Curtis Krueger and Dean Krueger. And folks, let's start with the families back in Europe and bring them forward and all the experiences that y'all had. Okay?
Okay. All right. I guess I'll start with the
European
history. Well, I've often said Curt probably knows a little bit more about the Helotes Leon Valley history than I do. I've done a little bit more studying and talking to Gloria Anderson and others about the background of the Kruegers and Steubings.
What a source.
Our parents, Milton Krueger and Irene Krueger, had some interesting backgrounds in their ancestry, so I'll just relate a little bit of that. Milton Krueger, German from New Braunfels area. The Kruegers came in 1858 from Prussia. And came through the normal routine, going through Galveston, Indianola, New Braunfels. And Martin Krueger was the first ancestor in the United States that I can remember reading about. And Martin Krueger came from Prussia, which was, one of the states. And the research we've done on that seems like at that time, after the Napoleonic Wars, that many of the Germanic states were going through three real challenges. The first was religious persecution and religious freedom. The noblemen that existed in those city-states would tell the serfs, the farmers, what type of religion they were to be. If the nobleman was Catholic, he said, "You will be Catholic." And there was the question of religious freedom. The second thing was this conscription at that time, the draft. It was a 10-year draft. I believe it was 16-year-olds were going into the army for Prussia, and they had to serve. So a lot of their parents were saying, that's too young. We don't want to lose our sons for that long. And then the other thing at that time, after the Napoleonic Wars, was it was just so crowded in the city-states, and so people were literally running into each other. So when they heard of free land, freedom of religion, and open territory. Nobody told them about the Indians, I guess.
No.
That's where really both the Krueger ancestries and the Steubing ancestries, our grandmother was a Steubing, was the reason they came here. Martin Krueger came and settled in New Braunfels. Krueger is a very well-known name in the New Braunfels area. And they're farmers, ranchers, car dealerships, and Krueger Canyon and Krueger Road, so that was really where the Kruegers stayed. Now our grandmother was a Steubing, and the Steubings were a little bit better known in the Germanic states because that background was some noblemen and some princes and counts. And, they came from Bicken, Germany, which was a part of Nassau. And those individuals had freemen that ran farms for them. And we think that's where most of the Steubings found. Now, they were related to the nobles because they married the noblemen's daughters. And then they came over, the Steubings came over in 1848 and again settled in New Braunfels. So we had the Steubings and the Kruegers, and that was on my dad's side. On my mom's side, her name was Irene Milsap before she married my dad. And the Milsaps are Scotch-Irish, a little bit of Cherokee Indian thrown in, and they were from Tennessee and North Carolina.
And Isaac Milsap died at the Alamo.
Yeah, we have relatives, Isaac Milsap at the Alamo, Ronnie Milsap, the country singer, several others. One of my grandfathers, John Hurley Milsap, that I almost have to relate. This is my mom's dad. When we're talking to him about things he did, he had some interesting things. He was a World War I hero and front line in France during World War I. Went over before the Doughboys to get ready for the Doughboys. But anyway, he told several stories that were real interesting. One was that these brothers in North Carolina kept trying to fly these blasted aeroplanes, aeroplanes, and he always had to help them move their planes from in and out of the hangar. And
I wonder who those people might have been.
We didn't even associate until Grandpa passed away, and then my Uncle Johnny said, that was the Wright brothers. And so he is a real interesting man in the background who was a railroad telegrapher, around the telegraph keys. I remember Curt and I still playing with those little keys in his back building. He also was the marshal on the railroad on the weekends. He would be sworn in as a marshal to prevent robberies and several other things. So that's Scotch-Irish. He married a German girl. So we have a lot of German in our background, with my dad being full German and my mom being Ham, and then the Milsap's clan being Scotch-Irish and English.
And Grandpa Milsap drove an ambulance bringing wounded from the battlefield.
Wow.
And on one of his trips back with the wounded, a German MiG came down at him and fired ahead of him, and he saw the flash of the bullets and he stopped the ambulance. They were not supposed to shoot at ambulances with the
Red Cross on the top.
from the war. And he'd start off again, he would see the flash, and he would stop the ambulance where the bullets hit ahead of him. But finally the pilot figured out what he was doing and shot behind him, and he lost one eye with glass behind when his ambulance did get hit. So I mean, he had quite an interesting life story in itself, and that's from my maternal grandfather's side.
And get there setting things up so we could send an expeditionary force in. And that, they'd probably call them Rangers or SEALs or something else.
Well, he met my grandmother, and we don't know how long they dated, but we know that he married her 3 days after she turned 21, and then he had to report to Fort Sam here in San Antonio. They were in George West at the time. And I reported a week after they got married. And then he was shipped to New York, and then finally over to France to prepare. And then he drove the ambulance to the front line in France. But an interesting story there is that we found 35 letters after my mom passed away from Grandpa Milsap's
Back
to his new bride. 35 letters from frontline France, often, you know, he couldn't say exactly where he was because it was censored. But the greatest letters you ever saw describing the war and also describing his love for her. My Uncle Johnny's going to hate me for saying this on tape, but others, he always wrote, my dear little bride, my sweet honey, my cute little thing. He never called her by her first name. And I asked Curt, I said, I wonder if he knew her first name. But, you know, that marriage only lasted, what, about 70 years. So
he found the name.
He found the name, but they are some fascinating letters.
And they married where?
They married, I believe, in George West, and then she stayed with her parents there on the farm in George West, and he went overseas and stayed there for, I guess, 2.5 years overseas.
Now these were grandparents.
Grandparents. This is John Milsap's, which is my mom's dad.
Right.
And so that's that. My mom's side is interesting. My grandmother, whose name was Schonert Milsap, and Florence Schonert Milsap, she was a farmer's daughter. And she had farms, and they had farms in 3 or 4 places in Texas. So anyway, it's just a real interesting history, and he has an interesting history.
And the Steubing, of course, with Henry Steubing, was the brother of Charles Steubing, who was our great-great grandson.
Yeah. We can go to, let's leave the Milsaps now and go to the Kruegers.
But anyhow, on that, they actually came with Prince Salm, Germany, and settled in the Salms area. And I remember as a boy going back to the Krueger ranch and farm, and there was this beautiful canyon at the start of the hill country. Well, I told Dean all about this canyon, and we went back there to find it and see it. It's now a gravel pit. I mean, it had some of the most unique fauna and different trees that grew nowhere else, and it was just beautiful.
It just happened to make good aggregate.
Yeah.
And there's still portions of it that are beautiful, you know, if you can get away from the gravel pit. But it's called Krueger Canyon, so if you go out there, it's a pretty massive area in New Braunfels.
We need the parents together. But tell me where your parents went to school.
Okay, my dad, well, I'll tell you what, let me go with my mom first, because my dad's history is Northside. My mom was a Jefferson girl, city girl. Irene Milsap, and the rest of that story, which is kind of interesting, is in 1941 and 1942, many of the boys were going into the service, of course, with World War II. And some of the farmers' sons were allowed to stay on the farm, of course, because we needed the crops in the United States. But you had a shortage of boys in those years. So Zion of Helotes always had very active softball and hardball teams. But they were running out of boys. So they said, well, we need to get another church involved, and maybe we could combine two churches to form a team. So they found Beacon Hills Lutheran in the city.
Yeah.
And they also were short some boys. So they combined those two teams. Well, that's why Curt and I are here. When the Beacon Hills boys brought their sisters along to the games, the Helotes Farm boys met them, and the three Milsap girls married three boys off that.
Good.
So we had we've had baseball and softball and athletics in our history, but you can see why. Our dad was an excellent semi-pro baseball player, and we have some other stories about that. But that's how Mom and Dad met and fell in love. And my dad used to say, yep, we needed something new in the line, so I went and found a city girl. And they got married.
It was funny. He could throw an underhand fast pitch so fast that he was known throughout the city, and semi-pro teams wanted him to pitch for him and everything. And I have pictures of him in the Express newspapers saying Milton Krueger. And this, you know, you just don't get on a sports page for a softball league in this day and time. But back then, he was so famous in softball that they put his picture in the sports page to say there was going to be a softball game at Lambert Field in Brackenridge Park, and Milton Krueger was going to be on the mound. So that's when I found that somebody gave me that old pictures in the paper, I thought, well, that's something. My dad was doing pretty good to get in for softball.
Outside the Texas League and some other leagues, hardball. Softball was a major event in the city, as was hardball. But they loved to play softball. And Staples and Prairie Lee and really small George West, others would play. And they had great athletes. In fact, one of the superintendents at East Central was an outstanding pitcher.
Well, the other thing I might mention here is I think back to that Zion Lutheran, Beacon Hill Lutheran team. My mom's brother, Johnny Milsap's younger brother, ended up meeting and marrying a girl who attended Los Reyes Elementary and Helotes Elementary, and Lottie Hendricks. So our Aunt Lottie and Johnny, who are both still alive, and we treasure as almost alternate parents. Johnny came out here and found one of these country girls and married her. And they're still, you know, they still live off of Hollyhock here. In
Okay,
Northside.
so your mom went to Jeff and
Went to Jefferson. Dad went to Leon Valley through
Valley.
the 7th, 8th grade, whatever
Right.
they had at that time, and then started working on the farm.
and that was normal.
That was normal.
Yeah.
You know, if you were gonna go to high school, you had to go to Jefferson or Fox Tech,
Yeah.
possibly. But you had a trip on horseback to go to high school every day. It's a 20-mile drive. Well, from Eldest to downtown San Antonio is 20 miles. So he lived on the farm between Leon Valley and Eldest, and so he went to the new Leon Valley School. His sister, our Aunt Lima, went to Everett Elementary,
Which was a big school.
you know, which she probably she might have gone with the transition when it moved from Everett to Leon Valley Elementary.
And Mother also went to Durham Business College for 2 years. I mean, that was a college back then.
Well,
There were very few colleges in San Antonio.
Well,
And she considered herself an associate degree.
who were some of your dad's classmates at Leon Valley?
Oh gosh, we're talking about Steubing. We're talking about Sowers.
His
we're talking
principal was Terliff Gates, who started up the ag from Burbank High
That's
School
right.
and was principal at Burbank for
For
years.
30-something years.
And he was known to be a character. Dad had a cousin named Jamie Gusson who was they played hardball in the elementary schools, played against other teams in Bexar County.
Well, Gates set up everything.
He set it
He
all
got up a running track there at Leon Valley.
Sure
And
did.
And
WPA or PWA.
every once in a while when they were playing a really tough team, he would say, "Milton, you think that cousin of yours that goes to Calabar School could pitch for us tomorrow?" Dad said, "Oh yeah, well."
They had the
I'll ask
UIL at this time.
And he would, and here recently, this James Gusson, who was a cousin, his daughter said, "How come I have a picture of my dad with a Leon Valley uniform on when he went to Calabar School?" And I told her the story that my dad had told him that Terliff Gates snuck him over because Calabar School didn't have a school, have a team at the time, and he would have him pitch for Leon Valley.
The other thing my dad told us about those experiences at Leon Valley in competition. Let's say you had 40 students at Leon Valley. Well, during the picking time, during the crop time, it was 20, because those kids were helping at the farm.
Girls and boys.
And yes, both. But Dad said, you know, Mr. Gates, who was principal and a teacher, you know, Mr. Gates would go out in that Model T. He said, and that was really the first bus transportation we had, because when there was a game coming on, he would go out in that Model T and pick up about 5 of us to make sure we showed up. Then we'd have the game. He'd make us go to school for a couple hours, and then we'd go pick the crops. But they had a pretty organized athletic activity too.
Yeah, that was just the kind of guy he was.
Oh, obviously my dad thought a lot of it. Without going too far back in history, in 1902, well, I'll go ahead with, we had the Steubing ancestry I mentioned went through New Braunfels.
Right.
And it's a group of individuals that were hardworking, civic-minded. Steubings and Goms you'll always see involved in things in the community. And Carl Steubing and his brother Henry Jr., which the school is named after Henry Jr., came and bought large parcels of land in the Leon Valley area. And our ancestor, Charles Steubing, bought 800 acres that would go from Eckert Road, where Texas Star Inn, now Grady's is, all the way down Bandera, take a left on Gilbo, all the way to Tetzel, and that was the property of Charles or Carl Steubing. He gave 100 acres to his daughter, which is our grandmother, Margarita Steubing Krueger. Gave or sold 100 acres, depending on which ancestors you want to talk to about it. He also gave to his son Eddie 200 acres. Boys always got a little bit more than the girls. And then when our grandfather Albert Krueger married Margarita Steubing, he in effect took over the farm and made it into a dairy farm. But that's all that land, or that's 300 acres of all that land that is in the Tetzel Road, Tilbo Road, Bandera Road area. Then Carl Steubing sold the majority of the land to Paul Max Swain, who was later connected to Jefferson State Bank. And that would be about 1940. But the original home site, which was built in 1860, is still standing on that land.
It should be a historic monument.
Yeah.
And it's still there behind Texas Star.
Across Jefferson Bank, behind the trees, where it can't be seen from the road. But it was made of old limestone, huge rock that they quarried with heat out of the Leon Creek. And I remember it had a dog run in the early days. The kitchen and the living room were on one side, and maybe one bedroom, and on the other side the dog run with all bedrooms for the children. Well, when my uncle and aunt moved into this house, once the original Steubing got too old and moved into the town to live with one of the sisters, one of his daughters, they closed that hallway in and made it part of the house and an open dog run. And I'll never forget, up on the limestone wall from the early days, I mean, the house was built, when did you say,
1860.
In 1860, there were still Comanche Indians right there. And I remember there was this huge gun rack, like you see in the old Western movies, with all the 30-30s lined up, ready for Indian attacks and everything, and with holes or half-moon holes still cut in the doors. So the history on that house goes back.
And that house is there.
Yeah.
It's been added to.
Paul McSwain remodeled it and lived in it for a while until they moved out.
Which side of Bandera is it on? I'm having...
It's outside the Grady's on right
side
now.
of Grady.
Yeah. And if you go down Bandera, I would say it's almost right across from where Jefferson State Bank.
He had a little land on that side of Bandera where he built the bank.
The east side of Leon Creek.
Right.
And your place, as I recall it, was on the west side.
And that Leon Creek limestone is what they added to the house with. They would take that limestone, stop up one end of it, and pour water in the holes in the limestone, and let it soak for a week, and then they would just saw it by hand. Saw rock.
It is just amazing to hear people talk about it. And it's similar to the kind of work that some of them did in Germany.
Yes. And some were skilled from that.
Skilled. In fact, John Igo suspicions that some of his kinfolk had been conscripted by King Ludwig to make Neuschwanstein and two other palaces. And they got out of Dodge because they were just worked to death.
When our ancestors came over in the 1840s and 1850s, there were 300 different Germanic provinces and city-states. All had their little noblemen, and of course the king, or the emperor in some instances, would demand so much in taxation.
Yeah.
The nobles would have to get their taxation. Then you had those overseers, then you had the kings, and all of a sudden taxation was almost at 50%. And that was the other thing. I didn't mention that as taxation as one of the reasons, but it was obviously there too.
It was there.
Getting back to the masonry, Henry Steubing, which Steubing Elementary is named for, he was quite a builder. He could build anything. He was a carpenter, a masonry, he did it all. He can install windows. Anybody that ever needed help building a barn, anything, he was called to lay it out and plan it. In fact, he was the main one that built the first Zion Lutheran Church in Helotes. He was the main carpenter.
You look
on
at
that
a
job.
picture of him, and you can see, you know, strength and intelligence, and you know that he could pull those things off.
And that would be one of our great uncles, great uncles. I left out an ancestor here. We talked about Johann Steubing came in 1848 to New Braunfels. Then there was a Heinrich Steubing, which was the original Heinrich. And then Heinrich had Carl and Henry Steubing. So I didn't want to leave Heinrich out because he also was a craftsman and quite a musician.
One of the stories that I understand is that people coming from Germany were promised land and probably were promised a small house in the negotiations to get them to come. And that has been told, the story has been told in the interview. Did that ever come up in some of your discussions, that they got to New Braunfels, the land was there, but they had to build a house?
And sometimes the land wasn't there.
The land was there.
Some of them came in. First of all, it was very similar to the Pilgrims. 50% did not finish the trip. There were deaths, many burials at sea. I guess it was 3 to 4 months that it took, but it was just a hard journey. Yes, they were promised, and I think sometimes sincerely promised, a certain amount of land, at least 160 acres. But they were told there is so much wood there that you will either have homes already built there, or you can build your homes in no time.
And that's more logical in
And
negotiation.
You look at New Braunfels, you look at Fredericksburg, you look at Bulverde, all those oaks, all those cedars.
The cypress trees on the
river,
on Guadalupe River, were excellent for log cabins because they grew straight and they were large. We didn't have to cut a million little trees to make up the logs. So
but the problem is, on the way over, Mr. Jordan, if they were allowed to take any furniture or even guns, that ended up being destroyed or tossed overboard. So when they hit ground in Indianola or Galveston, they didn't have anything
on their back.
You know, and then they say, well, when are we going into Braunfels? Well, some of them had to wait 3 or 4 months with no job, no food, no tools that they lived by. And they said, wait a second, it maybe wasn't so bad in Germany. kind of like Moses and the Israelites saying, hey, maybe it wasn't so bad in Egypt.
Got a return ticket.
Yeah, so that was a real challenge, and because of that, they had large families, but they also had a lot of deaths in those families.
Have you seen pictures of Indianola?
Not that I recall.
I have in books before it burned down.
Yeah, well, it burned down and a hurricane came through, and it was quite an operation.
It was going to be like the capital of Texas until the fire.
Yeah, and it provided everything they needed. Stores, barbershops, whatever, the typical things that a small community would have, hotels.
Well, it must have been quite a setup. And when I said it was probably sincere, I'm sure they overemphasized some things. But one thing they didn't emphasize were the Indian tribes and how fierce they were out here. And that's the whole German history revolves around, I think a lot of people know that the Germans in Fredericksburg made a treaty with the Comanches that was the only treaty that was honored by the white men. And to this day, it was never broken. So when the English settlers were getting hit all throughout Austin, all the way up into Fredericksburg, there were several decades where the Germans were not attacked because they honored that treaty. Now, they gave an awful lot of hides and materials
a lot of things to get it,
but that was honored.
But they did honor it, they kept it, and the Comanche hated the Texians or Texans, and they kept fighting them. But the Germans were considered like a separate people. Their farms were left alone. They did not have horses and mules stolen. It was really an amazing thing. It's the only treaty with American Indians. Our government treated the Indians pathetically, moving them from place to place, giving them land in Indian territory, and all of a sudden, people, let's have a land run, we'll take it away, let's push them a little closer
You found
together.
gold? What do you mean gold? We'll take that.
It was it was unreal how we did treat the American Indian, but the German settlers made friends with them, made treaties, and they never attacked or killed any German settlers.
And the Germans were truly persecuted during the Civil War time, because most of them did refuse to fight for the Confederacy. And there were some, I'm not going to go into those stories, but there were some incidents where, you know, basically they refused to be drafted, refused to be conscripted.
There were so many unique things back during that Civil War where people could buy their way out. And
the Germans, because they were so many of them were serfs, and they worked so hard to become freedmen working their own farms in Germany, they came over here and they said, no, slavery is wrong. It really is wrong. And they didn't see all the other reasons that the Civil War happened besides slavery. They might not have been as aware of, but they said it's wrong, so we do not want to fight.
The entire town of Comfort fled toward Mexico and was attacked by rebel forces, so they would not go and join the Union Army they were afraid of. So Texas history is quite amazing, the things that happen.
It's not from that old Saucony vacuum book of flip the pages and hear the Texas side of it.
So anyway, we have that German history and we're proud of it.
And you should be. Tell us about your memories of elementary school and on through high school.
Actually be the first class to go all the way through Northside.
Consolidated Northside.
Except for a technicality. About 4 or 5 of the mothers went to Principal Woods. Was he the first one?
I think so. I think at that time.
And they said, our child was born after September 1st, but they're going to be so old starting school next year. Can y'all make an exception? So they did. There were 4 or 5 of us that were born in September. They let us start school. But being the first year of Northside, no one knew what the classes they had, what they would be. And then all of a sudden they found 5 or 6 kids that they'd been put in the 2nd grade that did not belong. They had no 1st grade background at all. So they had already, the school was overcrowded in the 1st year in Northside. They moved these kids back to 1st grade. There were not enough desks, so they sent us kids born after September 1st home to wait a whole year to start school. So I actually started the 1st year, but
twice.
I ended up the 2nd year of Northside.
With the consolidation at that time, you had many of the other elementary schools said, hey, we want to get in Northside. Not all of them did, but some of them did, and all of a sudden you had more kids than you expected. And Northside's been fighting that ever since.
I believe we've had that.
And then Mr. Carl Cody became my principal in the 5th and 6th grades. And that is really the start of athletics in the Northside district. He was very athletic minded. He started a schedule with all the other elementary schools, Lock Hill, Mackey, Helotes, and we had a baseball, softball team. We had a track team. There was an old track at Leon Valley School where there was a district track meet, and he organized all this. And so, I mean, he really was one of the early pioneers in athletics that started in the Northside district. And one other thing, my 1st grade teacher was a Mrs. Myers, and after I got out of elementary school, 2 years with Mr. Cody being my principal, I found out he had gone back and married Mrs. Myers, and she had become Mrs. Cody.
Right.
And I remember on that background, it seemed that her husband had been a pilot in the Korean War or something and had been shot down and killed. And she had missed school with us for a while. But it's very interesting that came about that way.
I'd like to make a note here that my brother has just admitted on camera that he is older than me. He goes around and tells people that I am the oldest son all the time. My brother is 5 years old. We're born on the same day.
Wow.
September 8th, my grandmother's birthday, Milsap's. And we laugh all the time.
The 8th?
The 8th, September the 8th. So we both actually couldn't start school until we were 7. In effect, we were 6, but only for a week. So we, when he was in the 6th grade at Leon Valley, I was in the 1st grade at Leon Valley. And that's where I got to know Mr. Cody, first of all, because he was my principal too. Only for a year or two. But then Mr. Cody, and I'll let Curt finish his history in a second, but Mr. Cody, when he left, he was replaced for a couple of other gentlemen who I respect, but the one principal I remember so well was Jim Carson came in. And you talk about a principal who was out amongst the kids, and that's why you remember those principals. They go out, they talk to you, they call you by name, and so Mr. Carson, I would say, was one of my early role models.
Mr. Cody was that way also. Previous principals, they were just in the office, kids didn't see him. You know, we had PE. Mr. Cody was out there playing ball with us. He was involved with us when we went out to that playground. He was like, took the teacher's job of watching out for the kids.
Who were some of your teachers?
There, oh man, it goes back. Beside Ms. I had a Mrs. Touch, was a 2nd grade teacher, and Mrs. Fox was my 4th grade teacher, I think, and Mrs. Pittman was like the 5th grade. And those are the only names that I could really remember.
And where did you go after 6th grade or 5th grade, whatever?
After 6th grade, I was, again, the guinea pig opening up Northside Junior High, which was called Saul Ross.
That's
it
right.
was on the Marshall campus. And I was, again, the first one to be in the Northside Junior High the first year that it opened. And being there, at the time, we had, of course, basketball program, junior high. My 8th grade year, I had scored pretty much at will, being as tall. I was already 6 foot tall when I was in 7th grade. And in my 8th grade year, the junior varsity, there on the same campus at Marshall, they didn't have anybody over 5'10" on the junior varsity. So the junior varsity coach came down and he said, I'd like to have your center, who's 6'2", come up and play on the junior varsity. So I was playing junior varsity basketball my last year in junior high, which helped me make the varsity as a freshman. Your letterman. I heard in the interview y'all did with the state team that he said Freddie Bryant was the only 4-year letterman, but I was also. Of course, I was back in the
We didn't look at ancient history then.
Who were some of your teachers?
I remember a Mrs. MacArthur, who became a Mrs. Fields when she married the local highway patrol.
That's right.
Do you remember that?
Of course.
She was my Spanish teacher, never could teach me how to roll my R's.
You have to understand, Curt's 5 years ahead of me. There was an awful lot of German spoken in our community. And when I came along, my mom said, we're going to speak a lot more English while they're growing up. Go ahead.
And I don't really recall many of, she moved up to high school from junior high later, but I don't recall that many of my junior high teachers. There was a Mrs. Pulaski that I remember. And of course, then when I got to high school, there was so many characters. Mrs. Peoples in speech, I ended up, she knew that I needed help stand up in front of an audience like I'm doing now. And
You're doing great.
You're doing
she,
good.
She made me president of speech class my senior year. I remember you kind of saying, you're an athlete. What, you're president of speech class? I remember your comment.
That must have been somebody else that said that. I would have been proud that you got up.
One of my boys can't be president of a speech class and go to poetry readings. So, but anyway, I did, and she was very instrumental in teaching me how to she put me in a play and being able to talk in front of the public. And of course, Mr. Perkins, I worked on the Rampage staff. And Mr. Neff, who taught history, had to be the most interesting teacher.
Great.
Oh, I mean, you could sit, you learned history in his class and you wanted to. He was probably one of the best high school teachers in any class that I remember, as far as standing up and teaching a class. He was just really great.
Around election time, he was just, you know,
I had him
prognosticator and everything.
Nixon Kennedy election. I had him, and that made that election and made me get into politics at an early age, having him at that class.
Who were your principal?
Homer Smith.
Great guy.
And who else?
Don't look at me. I was a little kid.
I think, was he there most all my time?
Probably.
He probably was.
Probably.
He
I
probably
don't
was.
recall another principal.
Yeah, there was a guy named Brant, whose brother was a basketball coach at Brackenridge. But I think Brant's story is it turned in his keys one day and Homer became the principal. He was a football coach and Homer could keep people in check. Andy Cobb, you remember?
Yes, Mr. Cobb. There was a Mrs. Goodnow that taught algebra.
That's right.
My least favorite subject in the whole world. I had all A's and B's throughout.
You're not mentioning any of your coaches.
Well, there were lots of them. Carl Waukee.
That's right.
He was a young, good-looking young man, and all of our girls were saying, "Oh, he's so good-looking," and we were all jealous. Boys were jealous of him.
Now, since you bring up Waukee, I'll tell you, I had a 6th period world geography class, and had way too many kids in it. So Homer Smith or somebody came in and said, "We're going to open up a new class, new section in world geography, and Carl Waukee is going to teach. Now, do I have any volunteers?" The hands went up like mad. There went my. You had some really good teachers. Perkins was good, right? And Andy Cobb was good. Larry Weiner didn't get you for choir.
No.
Or Bob Lewis didn't get you in the band.
No.
But they were really good people. Weiner became world famous.
World famous.
We did have some good bands back then.
Bob did
a great job. Later, getting to work with Bob, when I got to office, that was a joy.
Tell me about some of your classmates.
Well, that's a bad question to ask. Unlike the state championship team, we have not kept up. I don't know. None of them come to our reunions, and they're apparently spread over most of the United States. I know Benny Benford is in Austin. And was in the oil business, looking for buying up all properties to lease and things like that. Gary Munson was one of my classmates. He wasn't on the basketball. He did play junior high basketball, I think. But he has become quite successful in business down in the Houston. Leslie Schott, who you had as a B-team player, has sold a lot of his property and bought big ranches in South Texas. And I see him all the time, and he's still a good friend. But most of the old team have disappeared from the San Antonio area, and I've lost contact with.
Who was in your senior class, basketball-wise, etc.?
Rex Downing and Ray Bovair, Wayne Sturzenbach, and of course Barry Burns and Robert Landrum, who both died, as you know, early deaths.
All right. Barry did.
Yeah.
Robert alive.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. He flew, I forget how many missions in
And see,
helicopter pilot.
You better tell Robert you're sorry.
I'm sorry, Robert. I got the information that when you were in one of those raids, you were shot down. Told to me at a reunion.
And yeah, you had Benny and Dwight Bartlett
and for Dwight Bartlett, Kenneth Mays.
Yeah, Kenny. And I don't.
Of course, the earlier team with Dennis Terry and Hank Cox and Wayne Banky.
And the guy that wore his warm-up.
Jeffy Fader. It was against his religion, he said, to show his legs.
Now, he would have been in your senior class if he'd stayed here. Yeah. And he could shoot that much.
He could shoot it, but we had so many shooters in that senior class. What we needed were more big men.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of kids who could really shoot the basketball.
So you played for Mel Barbarack your
freshman and sophomore
freshman and sophomore year. I'm going to stop here and go and come back to you because I want to talk to you about what you did after high school. But Dean, take us through any part of elementary, middle, and high school.
I had some of the same teachers as Curt did. I had Mrs. Toutgrade and Mrs. Fox in the 4th grade. But Curt missed Mrs. Burns. And you talk about a fabulous teacher you missed. I could tell stories that would take way too much tape time about Mrs. Burns. One thing I do want to say is Mrs. Burns was married to a farmer, a dairy farmer, Bob Burns.
Who was a college graduate.
Yes. And Mrs. Burns recognized something in me as far as mathematics, I believe. And she called me up and she said, I know, this is only the 3rd grade, but have you ever thought about your future? And I said, well, I'm probably going to keep the farm going. And she said, that's great. We need farmers. Definitely need farmers. She said, but you know what? There's a whole world out there you need to take a look at, because you might be able to do something else. But by all means, if your dad wants you to stay on the farm and you want to be a farmer, that's a great opportunity, like my husband and like your dad. But she said there's some other things that could open up. So she put me in kind of an advanced mathematics program in the 3rd grade. And the other story about Miss Burns is I made pretty good grades, and I was very proud of it. And I got this S- in handwriting. You got grades E, S, and U. And
he wasn't going to give you an U, but
I said an S-. I had good handwriting, I thought. I might have been a little bit cocky as a 3rd grade. But I walked up to her and I said, Miss Burns, could you kind of explain to me why I got an S-? I've never had one of those before. She said, well, what do you think about your handwriting? I said, I think it's pretty good for a guy, for a boy. And she said, it is pretty good for a boy. And I said, and she said, and you know what? It could be better. You need to spend more time on your handwriting. And that was a combination of challenge and devastation.
Yeah, devastation.
I started
heavy devastation.
I started writing so determined to show her I could improve my handwriting that even the day people come up to me and go, where'd you get such good handwriting? Well, that was Mrs. Burns, excuse me. And she did. She inspired me as far as thinking that more paths might open up than I thought.
Oh, she's a brilliant woman.
Oh.
And raised 2 really sharp kids. And she had an older son, oldest son, killed on their farm around what is now Medina Base, Blackland Air Force Base, Baptist Children's Home.
I remember that. She lost 2 sons.
2 sons.
I didn't remember the first one.
Well, in her interview, she's 90-something years old. In her interview, it was over with. She got up, she was back and everything. I left Johnny Pedraza out. I should have. And that's just the kind of person she wanted to be perfect. She wanted to recognize achievement and her relationship.
Unlike Curt, go ahead.
like he's saying, she made him work on his handwriting. Barbara, my wife, is now a teacher in the district, says come over to junior high. They can't even write in cursive. All they can do is print. And I think that's sad.
Computer age too.
Yeah.
I had Mrs. Smith first grade, Mrs. Couch second. I'll go through them real quick. Mrs. Burns third, Mrs. Fox fourth, Mrs. Forrester, Mrs. Sugart fifth, Mrs. Forrester sixth, and all outstanding teachers.
Lucky to have them.
No nonsense, but a great deal of respect for all of them. I mean, I just hit them, and I will always be indebted to Northside because of those individuals.
Middle school. Or
Middle
junior
school,
high.
I went to, first year I went to Sul Ross Junior High, which was on the Northside Marshall campus.
Big gym.
Oh yes, we didn't have a lot of area to build those athletic teams. I do remember some good experiences there. Ran into this math teacher there who also recognized my mathematics ability and put three of us into an accelerated math program within the regular program. And
Who was that?
was Jim Edwards.
Yeah.
And Mr. Edwards was also an inspiration, and he also said to Todd Kloss, Jimmy Judson, and myself, you three guys are going to go to college, and I don't really care what situation you're in when you're in high school, you're going to go to college, or I'm going to follow you, make sure you get into it. So very inspired there. My 8th grade year went to Pat Neff. It was opened up with all those city kids, and suddenly all the farmers' kids were going over to Pat Neff. So it was a little bit of culture shock at Pat Neff there for a while. I was 6'3" as an 8th grader. So all the high school coaches were looking at me going, this is going to be the biggest kid we've ever had. I was 6'1" as a 12-year-old little leaguer. I quit growing.
Yeah, stop.
I grew a ½ inch in 4 years. So I went from one of the biggest postmen in history of Northside basketball to playing some forward as a freshman, as a sophomore, made varsity, and played some as a forward. Never grew anymore, and Dockery said, I'm going to make him a third guard in a 3-guard offense. So I went from the biggest postman that everyone had dreams of, that I was going to be 6'9", and ended up playing guard my last 2 years. And
a big guard.
a
Not
big
strong guard.
the big guard that always took the littler guard guarding him underneath. It worked out. Teachers, Jay Dubose, coach and teacher. I remember very well in middle school and high school. High school, some of the same teachers he had. Mr. Perkins, because I was so involved in the Rampage and the sports editor for several years. And I remember well because we spent more time probably in his office than we did anywhere except the gym. So Mr. Perkins was an outstanding role model, and again, he inspired me to write and inspired me about history. I never had Mr. Neff, but Mr. Neff knew my name quite well because I would hear that booming voice. I had lockers right outside his classroom. Mr. Krueger! You're late. Sorry about that, Mike. That booming voice going up and down that hallway. And so I remember him very well.
Tell me about life after high school. What you're doing today.
Well, immediately I went to San Antonio College for a year and a half, and I took engineering drawing and became a draftsman. I got married and had 2 boys, and I went to work for Acme Screen Manufacturing in 1963 on June 3rd. And I worked there 46 years and 3 months till I retired last September 3rd.
Congratulations. Tell me about your children.
My kids, Garrett is in charge of special education at Vale Middle School, works with mathematics. My wife, Barbara, opened Jack Jordan Middle School, and I met her. We've been married 32 years in August, and after my first marriage didn't work out, Dean was working with her, but he never introduced her to me. But one of his friends did, he didn't want to get in the middle of something that might not work out. So, I mean, we hit it off. She, at that time, was a volleyball and basketball coach, and we hit it off. I followed and went to her games, of course, because I love sports, and it was just great to have somebody that, you know, you had a lot in common with. We follow all her kids going to the high school games all the way through high school. She's had like 8 girls get major college scholarships.
Now your children?
So Garrett is
at Vail.
At Vail. Barbara has also moved to Vail, and she is now in the English department. And she decided to, that was her major, and PE was her minor in college. So she's gone back to teaching her major now that she's gotten over 60.
What do you hear what his son Jason is doing?
And my son Jason, he got this degree in government finance from Texas State University. And I thought, what are you going to do with that? Work for some city government where you lose your job every time somebody new gets elected or something? I mean, and anyway, he got on with the IRS, and he's worked his way up till he's in his early 40s now. And he was selected, he's now a treasury man. He's a team man that goes out after the bad guys.
Really bad guy.
But so I'm quite proud of him.
Go ahead.
I have a stepson, Mike, who played, of course, Garrett and Jason both were basketball stars. Garrett averaged 21 points a game with MVP all district.
Should have won by district up north.
Yeah, and Jason played with Ski Jones on the team. They had a very good team, and he was a good player. And my stepson Mike played baseball, was a baseball pitcher at Marshall. And he is now, he's worked with hearts. He takes care of the patients for the doctor, is real good about letting them know what's going on. He actually has gone and picked up the kidneys or heart transplants from the airplane when they come in. And beside that, he's in this card business online where you put out all your cards for Christmas, everything on there, all your relatives, birthdays, anniversaries, everything, and they send a card, and you don't have to do anything or remember doing it.
My wife is Kathy. We live together, and she's a retired lab tech, and I'm retired now from administration and teaching in Northside District. So we're really enjoying our time together. My son Ryan works at USAA, where he is a product analyst with the USAA Casualty and Property Division. And his wife Jennifer is working here in Northside with Shirley Schreiber. She is the health services supervisor, former pediatric nurse at several hospitals here.
Lucky to have her.
And my daughter Megan is raising her family in Waco. She married a West Texas young man named Corey Stanford from Plains, Texas, which is pretty close to New Mexico. And I have 2 grandsons up in Waco. Megan is a water analyst for the Waco water system. And she put her biology degree to work there by working there.
What did you do after high school?
After high school, I had to make I was injured my senior year, broke 3 bones in my foot in district championship, not district championship, but different district play my senior year with 5 games left. I had 5 scholarship possibilities in basketball. As soon as I broke my foot, 4 of them disappeared real quickly. But Shriner Institute in Kerrville, a coach named Dick Harbin saw me play in the state championship game and he honored the scholarship. And which surprised, I think, Coach Dockery and myself as well. And he said, hey, I made a verbal to this young man. He's got good grades. Let's bring him to Shriner. So I went to Shriner, played basketball for them 2 years. I wanted to come back to San Antonio because I was missing Kathy, quite frankly. Went to St. Mary's and graduated there with a teaching certification and degrees in education and history and philosophy and some other areas. Started teaching in Northside. Started at Rayburn as an American history and Texas history teacher. Bryce Harlan hired me. Went from Rayburn to Holmes High School as an assistant principal, and then later several administrative jobs in Northside. My final one was deputy superintendent, where I retired 2002.
This has been a pleasure for me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to know you. It's been to my benefit. And I attended one of your son's wedding. I attended son and daughter's wedding, right? And it's been a pleasure to know y'all. And I'm better for it. Good to be with you. I'm sorry.
You've always been one of my mentors, so that I've always looked up to.